for cooking, the best ingredients for our training process, we really have to choose well. And I don't know, how many guys of you really like cooking? Can we see? Or at least some. Okay. How many of these guys who really like cooking are cooking with a book or with a recipe? Or maybe 2, 3. Okay. Why? But it's more like the recipe gives us an orientation, and the rest is your feeling. And it's the same with the training process. You have already the ingredients because you're a coach, but there's also a certain kind of feeling, and it's also important to keep in mind when you cook, you know, as a chief, too much salt, it's not good. The same it's in football. If you have a too high load, it's not good because you cannot take it away, it will increase an injury and so on. So we have this interaction taking place with the player, with all the things he has inside, with the environment. So something we can maybe control, we see, maybe even some things we don't know, and together with the task. This is always an interaction relating to the training process. And then there comes our training. And our training should be representative information. What is that? Sometimes all these studies leads to complicate things, because they are explaining things which are usually they're easy, but because they have a lot of words, and maybe even a lot of words we don't know, we want to step apart from this. When you plan your training, you want to have representative information, which means if you're doing a game and you say there are not only 2 touches allowed, the question would be, is that a representative information which relates to the game? In the game, on the weekend, we have 2 goals. We have a penalty box, we have a referee, we have the rules of football, and you are free of touches. So if you decide to play just 2 touches, it's not a representative information. Can you do it? Can you play 2 touches? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. But only, from my perspective, only if you keep in mind that it's not a representative information, and that it's so important for you that they play 2 touches because it gives you something more for your game idea, which will not arise during a normal context. In the study they bring an example that they want to force the players to dribble. And how they did this, they say, if I'm able to read the pass and anticipate the pass, and you score by this, it will wear you double. Twice. So, what I found interesting about it was that they thought completely the other way around. They didn't say you have to dribble, and they didn't constrain it really restrictive and saying, no, you are not allowed to do this or that or that. They just say, if the pass is played that obviously, that I can read it and that you lose the ball by it, there is a consequence, which means the goal values twice. So the other way around is, okay, if there's a risk of anticipation pass, I will dribble. So usually we are, and in all our formation, we are talking about, okay, this goal value twice, 3 times, whatever, 3 points for this, 5 points for this, 8 points for this, because you want this to happen. And now you are just rewarding a certain kind of behavior we like. We like to anticipate passes. But in order to force the other solution. So, all of this is part of your training process if you step away from a certain part of it, because you maybe say we want to have more opponents, we want to play with another ball because we are in youth development and we know with a small ball there's more coordination needed. So this is more important at that moment than the other thing, no problem. If it's multi-directional, it could be, then we have to know, yeah, it's not representative to the game, but it gives us 360 degrees, so in the perception of the player, and maybe we feel this is at that moment more important. But it's a really, really small and fine line not to decontextualize the training, because then it could be artificial. Then you train habits you don't want or you don't need. So this is why, well, I think it's also in medicine, we are artists. We're doing art. It's the art of coaching. Because you really have to decide carefully what you want to do and what there's what there's the outcome out of it. So all of this, the environment, the play, as we have seen before, and our intentions. So ideally, the shared intentions of our players, because we have something shared, a certain idea, will lead to shared affordances and to adaptive players. It's a synergizing process which takes place together with the players, because there's always the perception action taking place. There's a perception action cycle, because I'm perceiving a certain game situation and this leads to a certain action. So when we keep in mind the first example of the passing drill, there's really less perception action. So if I do it, or if I would do it, maybe it's not 50 minutes or 20 minutes, maybe it's a shorter time. But when I feel the players need it and they have the context for them and they have the relation to it, maybe it's good. And then we have our friend here, because there's always that saying, yeah, it's survival of the fittest and so on. And it's not like this. Because if it would be survival of the fittest, probably him would be stronger than me. So I'm not here but him and talking, maybe. But the miracle of the human being is that we are such adaptive systems, that we are such adaptive, we can adapt to everything. In the last 2 years, we were able to adapt to wear face masks in public transport. In Portugal, when I went there was a not a recommendation, there was obligatory to wear a face mask on the street. And I don't know if you ever have been to Porto, but it's like up and down and there are a lot of hills. And the weather's almost the same like in Hamburg, but in May there's also sun. And you can imagine, Tim, because it's Porto, there's a nice river, there's a nice town, so close to the river, so down with your baggage, but the only person, because German, who were wearing the face mask. And during that time, I think just the day before, there were also the Champions League final from the Final Four tournament in Porto. So there were a lot of English tourists, social, cultural concert, I don't know, everybody drunk. No one was wearing a face mask. The police says, yeah, come to me, I will give you a fine. There were also some pretty ladies like doing their holiday there, not wearing a face mask, but no fine. So, we can see a team who is more adaptive will give you a benefit into competition. So, in order to be more adaptive, we have to have our exercise and our training really variable. So, with a lot of variability, a lot of changes, a lot of different circumstances, different contexts, will enrich your game idea. And this is also I hope not to tell them the same thing like Vito Severino said, but when he was a professor of our master, he also explained how they prepared for matches, for example on the weekend or in Champions League, because at that time he was assistant coach at Shakhtar Donetsk, and it was the time when Shakhtar Donetsk won twice against Real Madrid. And he said, okay, how much do you talk about your next opponent? We don't talk about our next opponent, but we give certain influences about situations we probably will face in our training context. So this will lead, because we have our game idea, our game model. I will talk about this in a second. We have to express it in different environments. So it has to be adaptive and not stay fixed like T-Rex. So I talked already about the shared affordances, because the best thing you can imagine and the best thing for your team which could be happening is that everybody has such a strong connection like you have with your best friend when you play football. That everybody knows according to the same thing what our intention is, and that we are able to fulfill this intention, and that we are perceiving the same affordances in the same moment. And we have prepared here a clip from a great guy called Iniesta, and we have a look at it.
Ha dado el paso. Ha sido solo un par de acciones, Jorge, pero da la sensación de que el equipo está lejos de la exigencia de este tipo de partidos. Messi para el segundo, Messi dentro del área, Messi no. La cruzado. La saque de meta para Keylor Navas.
Chich, el futbolista croata, deja su sitio en el centro del campo. Entra Mariano, futbolista con el dorsal 18, viene a hacer 3 goles. Busca el tanto del empate.
Ha dado el paso. Ha sido solo un par de acciones, Jorge, pero da la sensación de que el equipo está lejos de la exigencia de este tipo de partidos. Messi para el segundo, Messi dentro del área, Messi no. La cruzado. La saque de meta para Keylor Navas.
Chich, el futbolista croata, deja su sitio en el centro del campo. Entra Mariano, futbolista con el dorsal 18, viene a hacer 3 goles. Busca el tanto del empate.
Ha dado el paso.
So, he's perceiving, and it's from the presentation from James Morgan, he did the Barca Innovation Hub. So, Iniesta sees the gap for the pass to Neymar, to the left side. But Modric, his opponent, was also able to read his intention. So, he moved slightly. So there were not anymore this gap to play the pass to Neymar. So this is why he changed it in the last moment, and he was able to perceive Messi. So when we see it,
Ha dado el paso. Ha sido solo un par de acciones, Jorge, pero da la sensación.
yeah, we can see even in the repetition.
Está lejos de la exigencia de
It matters.
Messi para el segundo, Messi dentro del área, Messi no. La cruzado. La saque de meta para Keylor
Already the
Navas.
pass, but before.
Chich, el futbolista croata, deja su...
Now, Iniesta is perceiving this gap, and he really wants to play that ball. And this is where he will first look.
sitio en el centro del campo.
Then he sees it's closed.
Entra.
And then if you see, there was a moment just before a second where they looked to each other. They both perceive at the same moment that space, and for them it gives the affordance to play a pass straight there. And because they are connected to that idea.
Futbolista con el dorsal 18, viene a hacer 3 goles. Busca el tanto del empate.
Ha dado el paso.
Okay. So this is about, or this is a good example for shared affordances. So the things we are usually doing we are perceiving in the same way, and we are perceiving the same possibilities for that kind of interaction, and if this will happen, it would be amazing. How we can achieve this? First of all, you have to develop your own game idea. It could be based on the values you have, it could be like from principles, but at the end you have your game idea. The game idea, and again, because in the world of football, Guardiola is a lot of times the best example, and it's also here. If you see and if you perceive a team from Guardiola, the Barca team, the Bayern team, now the Manchester City team, they have a lot of things in common. Are they playing exactly the same? No. So the sketch you will see, and our sketch, of course, it's the most beautiful town in the world, with our idea, will always be visible. But how it will be visible depends on the pens you have. The pens, the players, they are in your team, they will have a big impact on how the picture will look like, what you want to paint, what you want to draw. And as well, because they're players, and for me, the players always know a lot of things more than me about football, because they are playing. They are doing things I can't do. I just can't help them or her. So maybe because our pens have such a strong color, or are doing certain things we cannot imagine, but they are even better than anything we ever could have been imagined. So they will also enrich our game idea. Because there's an expression of professor who says, it's the game model, it's like the model who's walking in Milan. And you see like a nice robe or nice clothes wearing, and everybody wants to copy it. But they only know how it looks like. They don't know what the idea there's behind. So, and it's really difficult to copy something you can only perceive from outside, but in order to play with that kind of what you feel deep inside yourself. I also put two more things on that slide. Why? A chameleon, because I think one of the first quotes from Professor I saw was from an interview in New York Times, and it really amazed me. He said, the chameleon changes color, but never forget it's a chameleon. So, when you have your game idea and the team is expressing it in a certain kind of game model, the challenge is that we have to, or we will be in different contexts every weekend. So because it's not the same to play against Bayern Munich than to play against Mainz 05, or I don't know, against all these different teams. But still, we want to express our style of play, our game idea, in our game model, but in different environments. So we have to be able to adapt. Probably it's not possible to say, well, I want to play like Guardiola with a lot of possession and so on and so on. Yes, but do you have the players for this? Or will they have a different interpretation? And how you will express it in another environment. Maybe other parts of your game idea will arise more, or will have a bigger influence in the game at the weekend than usually, or than you thought of, because it's always changing. So, of course, you have to change the color of the chameleon. But will that be like the discussion we always have in Germany, and I'm expecting a new discussion after tomorrow? Should the national team play counter-attack? Should the national team play possession-based? How shall we play? Because, from my point of view, and it's not a critic, it's just from my point of view, when you see other countries, how the national teams are playing, for example Spain, they have a clearly developed DNA, they always play the same. Even Portugal plays more or less the same even if it's really tough to understand this because of the skilled players and how they express, it's more difficult to see a certain kind of DNA. It also depends if the old man is playing or not, but Cristiano is playing, it changes also everything, so sometimes a plan has a really big influence, but they remain being Portugal and playing Portugal. And I also put the broccoli there. And it leads well, there's a nice story that my colleague also gave me socks with the broccoli, but I'm not wearing them today, maybe tomorrow. But broccoli, why? Because your training session is like broccoli. And why is this? If you just take a roast of broccoli, you will be able to recognize that it's broccoli. If you take the whole, you see that it's broccoli, so it will always be considered as broccoli. And the same should be with every training week, every game, every season, everything you are doing, it's like broccoli. Because everything has a connection with your game idea, and it will be visible, at least for you, because not from the outside, because if from the outside nobody knows your game idea, it's not possible to perceive, oh, that training, what is this to do with your game idea? From the outside it has nothing to do. But you know that it's something different because you feel the players need this at a certain moment. So, in the end, football is like broccoli. Your training session, your training week should be recognized in order to show and to demonstrate this game idea. Iniesta also talked about the perception and about playing intuitive. So he says, in the moment I play well, I don't think during the game, and I don't know how the other players feel, but in my case, if I just think 1 second, if I'm thinking what I would do with the ball before I receive it, I already will be late. And you decide in an intuitive way. It's difficult to explain because in football there's no time to think. So in the end, it's about being in a certain kind of flow. In your day-by-day life, there are some guys who are always focusing to the past. In the past, there have been better players. In the past, there have been strikers in Germany and central defenders and so on. And also guys who are always focusing into the future. So tomorrow I will do this, tomorrow that, and tomorrow never comes. And the most important thing is to be here now. And you can see it in different circumstances. For example, I've been to Shanghai and I've been to an art gallery. And there was, as you know, in the gallery certain things to watch. And there was one guy taking a picture, and so on. And I thought, okay, when in which moment you can imagine to watch all these things again at your mobile device? Because why are you not enjoying the moment? Why are you not here? And that moment present. And there's another example, again from our selected teams, because we remove their mobile phones when we are together. We just put them away, and when, for example, 2 weeks ago we had been to Berlin, and then we have a room together, a conference room where we also have our meetings. It's allowed to use the mobile there, but not anywhere else. And afterwards on the trip home, we always ask the players, what was the best thing besides football? And the players answered, and not only one, a lot of players answered, the best thing was the time together. The bus trip together. Now I know these guys. There was even one guy who was the captain of the team, and he told me, yeah, now I know this guy. And I said, yeah, but you already played 2 seasons together in one squad. And now you know each other. the players, they like it. They perceive the liberation of the mobile and of the electronic and social media or antisocial or whatever world. Because they have the possibility to be in the moment. So we are creating the circumstances for them, and we are doing nothing in that moment. We just created the circumstances for them to interact and to connect. And they do. Because it's something deeply human to connect. Because this is why we usually live in cities. Because for us it's helpful to see at least one nice person. And in Hamburg you will find a lot. Yeah? For us there are even the three most important I's in football, which is intuition, initiative and improvisation. Why? Because in order to feel a certain game situation, in order to perceive or foresee a certain moment, you need intuition. You can train that. Then in order to take advantage of the situation, you need to take the initiative. So in a different moment in the game, we need players who take the initiative. And of course, when a plan fails, you will always need improvisation. So in order to come into the flow, we need possibilities that will lead us to it. And usually it's about challenges. For example, during the pandemic, in our football association, it was totally closed and it was not allowed to play football. But there had been a lot of kids playing football then. And when I saw them, I asked them, yeah, but didn't you see there's they put the, how you say, there they put, thank you, they put a sign that it's not allowed to play. And they said, no, we came from the other side. But which door? No, we climbed about the fence, through the fence. Okay, so if you put a fence, somebody will be able to learn climbing. If there's no fence, it's not a challenge. So this is also something in our, I think sometimes football coaches underestimate. If we give certain challenges which are not challenging, we can't do boredom. Because it's boring to do something like passing like this. It's not a challenge. This is why there are mistakes in this. It's not about concentration, it's because it's boring. But also, if it's a too complicated task, which could be, I could have been here today in the morning to say, I have to have a presentation, and the N60 was increasing when Philippe Topi, even Professor Prad is here. So will I be able to make it? And this is the best way to perform. To forget time, to forget everything else around you, just to be together with your task. And we can see this a lot of times when children are playing. They forget everything else, about everything else, time, whatever, they just play. Because they are in the moment. And if we are able to create this in training, and if our players would ask us, hey, how could that be? 90 minutes afterwards, I didn't perceive it like this. Because you enjoyed it. Because you were so much into your practice that you were not thinking about anything else. And this is, from our perspective, a great point to train and to be in there. I just want to be closer to the end, to bring two more things. Professor Prad also said, we don't want players who read the game, so it will mean we are reacting to what someone wrote. We want players who write the game in a collective basis. So that will mean to take the initiative collectively in order to interact. And there's a game situation. Of course, it's against Barca in the World Cup final against Santos, and you will see players who write the game in a collective basis. And maybe you even perceive more details. If we see. Or don't we see? Not directly.
Dabei?
So we take the opportunity to drink. Nee, einmal. Ja.
Pedro es otra cosa. Pedro no le interesa tanto que estén todos los otros allí. Va a buscar más el arco. Hoy está entre los suplentes, Pedro. Messi. La pelota de Xavi. Va para Thiago. La diagonal de Dani. Va con Fábregas. Qué bárbaro, Xavi. Siempre libre. Siempre libre. Y nunca quieto. Que esto es lo importante, Xavi. Iniesta. Sergio. Libre. A Xavi, pero márquenlo, que es el que les maneja el partido, por favor. Y además precisión, los pases son correctos y va Dani, Dani para Leonel. Aquí está Iniesta. Va con Messi. Va con Sergio. Entran, salen. Te marea el Barça. Ahí está Dani Alves. Atacante Edu. Puyol. Sergio. Xavi. Piqué. Iniesta. Arauca encima. De baila, por favor. No agarrar la pelota y te tocan así. Debe ser el sufrimiento más grande de un rival. Se viene Dani Alves, va Messi, va. Está solo, ahí está Xavi. ¡Qué golazo!
So, in the end, there's no even maybe no formation, but like in the example of complex adaptive systems, they are playing fluid. They were organized in certain routes. Maybe we cannot perceive every of these routes, but there is a certain kind of organization, and there's a shared interactions towards a common goal in order to achieve this. So, it's about creating a culture, creating a habit. The things we do a lot of times really often, and of course I'm a bad person that I'm having this kind of example, but you can see when you go for a walk, you see people who are married a long period. They become looking a bit the same, at least from the jacket they are wearing or something like this. And I have the theory is sometimes the owner of the dog has also it looks sometimes similar to the dog himself. So this is, and even this was a situation from a game this season, again, Liverpool against Brighton. It was just a short moment, as you can see, but even how they walk through a corner kick. For me, it was in that moment. It was they even walking the same, because they have so much time together training that they come closer to each other. And we had the discussion with Miguel Lopes, because at first we thought, okay, we are a product of our environment, but this is not true. We are a product of the interaction with our environment, because even if the environment sometimes is not that friendly for us, we still remain to create some or certain habits which are the other way around, which are part of our character, and because we stay strong enough in this. So, in the end, it's about the embodiment of the game idea, because the muscles have also the brain, so they become mentalized. And when you see certain teams, for example, Guardiola with Manchester City, Of course, this season with Haaland it's different, but they have the tendency to have a smaller squad. Not so high players. Why? Because for their style of play, they need different people like Atletico Madrid, for example. And there's a strong influence and connectivity, even until the team, from the championship you're playing in, which shapes every game, which shapes every training and so on. And there was, I don't know if you listened to it, Rui Faria, the former assistant coach of Jose Mourinho, was in a podcast recently, and there he described also the situation they faced at Manchester United, that you play against teams and the ball is always in the air. And then he said, well, they always told their team not to enter the same game like the opponents will. Because in the game of second balls, the opponent team is stronger. But in our game, we are the strongest usually. Because it's our game, nobody else can play like we can do. So not to adapt too much, of course we have to adapt, but not to focus too much on the others, but because of the organized repetition of our game idea, we are able to shape even our bodies towards our necessities of our game idea. And there's our role model. And I just want you to watch this moment of, it's from The Last Dance, from Netflix, because I'd like to put some points out of it. So, what has this to do with tactical periodization? First of all, nothing. But if you are in tactical periodization, a lot of things. It has nothing to do with it because it's a usual approach to do things separated, not connected. Do things separated like weightlifting before, and after the physical education, then we can play basketball or our game. So this has nothing to do with it. But I want to point out two things. First, he's saying he has to reconstruct or rebuild his model, his body. He remodeled his body after playing baseball. So, because he played baseball a lot of times, and of course he had a certain kind of training, his body shape was different towards the necessities of the game of baseball. In order to come back, what he did, okay, he did this gym stuff, but he invited the others in order to play. And this is a strong idea of tactical periodization, to say, I want to reconstruct my body. In the moment they were playing, he has to disadapt from the physical education and adapt by playing in the best competition. And as I said, it was even a stronger competition because it was like street basketball. There was no referee, but there were the toughest players in the world. So he played against the best players in order to prepare himself. And this is the message I want you to get out of it. Because even with this classic approach to say, okay, weightlifting and so on, the most important thing for coming back as Michael Jordan, being Michael Jordan, was not the weightlifting, but was playing with the others. So, to finish my presentation, what my objective was to give you some pieces that could enrich your training process and maybe even some more doubts to think about. So when we have the morpho cycle of tactical periodization, we have to respect certain principles, and one of the key principles is the unbreakable wholeness. So you need of the game. So you need the context of the game in order to create this adaptation. This we can have in a point of competition by giving 100%, and even respecting and knowing every player quite well and his context and how he is shaped in the things. And like you also see a river in the background, and it's almost the same. The river is starting being a river, even if it's small, but it's already starting being a river, and it is enriched, enriched, enriched through your process. So when you start with a team, you already will start as a river, and not just bringing somewhere water, because it's a difference. I don't know who's into coffee, but you will probably know there's a difference which water you take, how many coffee you take, if you're drinking from a plastic cup or from a ceramic cup. There's so many details which are important. So, as well, to be mindful with your game idea, being a river, remaining a river, but just being increased. And I hope that we can have this kind of culture. There's a good book from Pep Linders from Liverpool, and Pep is also a big, I can say, contribute to technical periodization, we can say. And I feel a lot of times that in Germany we have the culture that it's mine and we don't share something because we all have secrets. And I don't think there are a lot of secrets, because now, the last year, I spent a lot of time in Spain. I had seen a lot of training in Spain and Portugal. I've been with Miguel Lopes in Guimarães, and in the end, maybe there's one or two exercises, but as I said in the beginning, it's not about the exercise, it's about the meaning you will give it to the players. And there's also a nice quote from a Spanish scientist, Natalia Balaguer, who said, if you already know what will happen in training, it's not a training for an intelligent being. So I want to encourage you to have more space for surprise, to share things, because if we can share things, we will be more powerful in the end. So if you have any questions, I would be really glad to answer them, and thank you very much for your attention. Do we have questions in the moment? Or is it everybody needs to reconnect maybe to get a coffee? I'll be around the whole day tomorrow as well, so I would be glad to talk to you. Okay? So there's waiting coffee outside, and then we